I was thinking about going in and scanning, the yard or whatever, and whoever the biggest dude is going over and just
punching him. Yeah, really.
Punch him right across the chin and be like, "Get the fuck out of here!"
Yeah,
and then you establish like I'm the king of the party.
Well, I think this is more of the playbook for if you go to jail.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
You're right. Yes, wrong playbook. Wrong playbook.
Yeah. No, the kid graduation party playbook is a little bit, different.
Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs track by track. I am J. William Hall.
And I'm Dan Fiden. We'll be taking this journey together, providing context both personal and historical on some legendary bands. For this season, we've selected none other than Indie Rock Pioneers American Music Club. J. William Hall, welcome back. Another week. Side
Indeed.
B,
Yes.
Caught in a trap, and I can't back out because I love you too much, baby. How was the week?
The week was desperately long. The time between recording episodes of Backtracking are filled to the brim with listening to the album that we're going to be backtracking, doing the online research, the deep dives into the dusty historical microfiche to find the interviews, the articles, the opinions of Mr. Mark Eitzel at this stage in his life. The album, Caught in a Trap, 1998.
Yeah. Well, I had an equally good week, digging deep, researching intensively, and enjoying this 1998 release on Matador. One of the less well-known releases, I think, in the AMC Eitzel oeuvre, but I think as you might have heard from the last episode on Side A, definitely an album that kind of snuck up on me during my backtracking, and so far really, really like it. So why don't we dive right into Side B, J. William, and tackle the first track? Are you ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Well, why don't we do it? It is called Goodbye. It is 4 minutes and 3 seconds. Let's listen.
Seeing a dove on the end of its leash says, how can you live without trust? He said, love fades like all things do into dust, into dust.
Okay, Jay William. Do you want to tackle the lyrics here first, or do you want me to take these for a test drive?
I can talk about the lyrics. They are well-crafted lyrics. I enjoy them. They're very poetic. I like the refrain of "It's all been said and done, the who's and the what's and the whys, and I'm tired to the bone of telling you goodbye." That's the repeated chorus, and I think that this has sort of like the verses that are the more poetic kind of, you're not entirely sure what is going on. There's some cool images though. The whole first verse, seeing eye dog on the end of its leash, says, how can you live without trust? It said, love fades like all things do into dust, into dust. It's, there's just some good words on this one.
Yeah, man, I just feel like the first two verses of this song are a fucking triumph. The lines that you just read, I love. Such a strong, interesting opener that really kind of pulls you in. You're like, where is he going with this seeing eye dog thing? And then he just like, boom, drops your head in. Love fades like all things into dust, into dust. So wonderful. And then he goes right into this, it's all been said and done, the who's, the what's, and the whys. And I'm tired to the bone of telling you goodbye. So this song, it really is kind of a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. But dark and resigned and kind of, it feels like just a capitulation, right? This is the song that without the context of any research, I would have guessed if there were a song on this album that was a Kathleen song, I would have guessed it was this one. This felt to me like a logical song to kind of follow Mission Rock Resort off of 60 Watt Silver Lining, which was a Kathleen song. But I have no concrete evidence to that, and there was no source I could find that said it was a Kathleen song. But of all the songs on this album, this is the one that I kind of felt like might be a Kathleen song.
I agree. That's what I have in my notes as well, but I don't think I found a definitive statement to that. But I think it's clear that, her presence is still on this album. So the music on this one, this is the first appearance of James McNew on bass from Yo La Tengo and Steve Shelley of Sonic Youth on drums.
Yeah.
So this is the first, quote unquote, full band song.
Yeah.
And Kid Congo Powers is adding, guitar overdubs as well. This song is slowcore. This
totally.
Yes. This is like, I was like, this could be Idaho. Like you could hear Jeff Martin singing this song. Like this has a serious Idaho vibe to it. The vocals in the low range the whole time, but this is like an even more slowcore-y, like Highway 5. It's got that kind of vibe to it.
It really feels,
song.
I mean, totally agree on that slowcore thing. This song really was the song that I was like, this was the song that kind of, for me, pulled together the album. And I was like, God, I should be thinking about this as almost like an Engine era AMC album. This song felt to me so much like an Engine era AMC song. I think the Idaho comparison is right on and not something I thought of, but you're 100% right. Early Idaho, right? Kind of before the Alas EP, probably. Idaho, right?
Yeah, this is like I forget, second album, third album kind of thing.
Yeah, This Way Out kind of a
yes.
feel.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I love it. I mean, if you love slowcore, if you love Eitzel in that mode, kind of the Engine era mode, this is it, and he nails it. And I think the band is a perfect. Again, this was the song where I was like, God, I love this band for him. It feels like United Kingdom, kind of a slowcore tune. It really just feels like they're supporting him in exactly the right way. I think this is a killer song. Great opener to side B, and I think a really interesting side flip experience after If I Had a Gun.
I agree. Yeah, good side B opener. My only little quibble.
Okay, bring
is
it on.
Just I wish that the band had more time to, like, especially bass and drums. I feel like for most of the ones on this album that they're on here, it feels like they do a very safe, kind of straightforward sort of backing, which is fine. Kid Congo does great, wild stuff with his guitars. So they, it's good that they're holding it down, but I feel like, this is an example where AMC would have worked on this song, for a long time, like rehearsals and playing shows and whatever, and it would have developed more dynamics, because it's a dirge, like it's a slowcore dirge, and I think like the trying to make it because it's what is it 4 minutes and I don't know. You need more dynamics.
403.
Yeah. I feel like it needs slightly more like arranging or something. Like it feels like they kind of locked into something and just stayed steady like the whole way through.
I would agree with that. I mean, I do think that it has a bit of that kind of like freshness that 60 Watt has at some point. I'm saying fresh. It's just not as kind of tightly arranged. But again, it's one of those things that for me is evocative of United Kingdom, because I feel like a number of the songs on United Kingdom kind of have that same feel. Like the songs are, I wouldn't say undercooked in the way that I think the West songs were undercooked, but they would potentially benefit from a little bit more, work by the band. But again, I think there's always this kind of like spectrum in the AMC catalog where, as I said, I do think there are some songs, especially in the kind of height of the major label AMC era, like Mercury, that just feel like they were cooked too much, they were overcooked, right? Yeah. And they kind of took the again, my kind of classic example of this is what Godzilla said to God. I just feel like the raw version of that is so perfect, and they overcook it a bit on Mercury. It's still a beautiful song, but I think they cooked it past the perfection of tenderness and slightly rare center that is succulent and delicious.
So this one is, a little bit undercooked, but, it's kind of a first idea, best idea sort of approach.
Yeah.
Which is, actually the same as what they did on West, but you just had different players involved.
Yeah, I think that's right. All right, so should we move on to track 2 on side B, Queen of No One?
Yes.
Okay, Queen of No One, 3 minutes and 59 seconds. Why don't we dig into this one?
Okay.
Some of them are queens of prejudice and pride, dying on heroism. Some of them are queens of the chaos inside, celebrate their indecision.
Okay, Jay William. Lyrics. Interesting lyrics. I have, first thing I want to kind of call out, a very interesting, evocative line. He's a gold mine in reverse, dripping water and an ancient curse. I thought was really like kind of cool and interesting, evocative, great image, just really interesting. But as I was trying to kind of like get through this, there's this, Queen of No One, there's this queen thing, but the characters that he seems to be talking about primarily seem to be men. And so I kind of combining those two things, we have now out kind of Eitzel. Is this an image of him kind of painting these small portraits of various denizens of some gay bar that he goes to? Is that, am I way out over my skis here, or do you think there's some merit to that?
No doubt we are both way out over our skis, but that was more or less my interpretation. I thought he was talking about drag queens. But it could maybe just, characters in a gay bar or whatever. But that's definitely sort of the vibe that I got here.
Yeah, and I think if that is the case, it's kind of this interesting, it's like an interesting image of how he views those kinds of clubs and bars, right? It's clear that he sees a certain loneliness that is not necessarily entirely negative, but it's certainly complex. He paints the pictures of the characters within these clubs, not without sympathy, but certainly with some, I don't know. It is not an entirely positive portrait, I guess is what I'd say.
I think he's made it clear in articles, where he wasn't entirely comfortable just with that being sort of like, I don't,
Yeah.
just that scene.
Yeah, he does.
You know, like,
yeah.
you know, he, I don't know.
I
You know,
remember-
he
I
was kind
remember-
of on his own journey and didn't really tap. You know, he said that I forget which magazine wanted to do a profile on him.
Yeah.
You know, being out and whatever, and that being sort of the subject, and he was kind of like, no, I want to promote the album. You know, I don't necessarily want to do like a deep profile on my sexuality or whatever. And you know, so he was reluctant to sort of like really put that forward as like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of who would be around that time, like like what musical artist
who was really
you know,
out, and like that was the thing,
and that was like the main thing about their identity, or you know.
Yeah, there certainly were a few during that period of time. Yeah, I wish I had the kind of reference here that I could point you to, but I remember reading an interview with him where he talks specifically about not liking going to gay bars, primarily because he felt like there wasn't enough of a diversity of people in these things. He was much more interested in just kind of going to a regular kind of a, you know, divier bar and meeting all of the strange and interesting people that exist in those places. I wish I could point to the interview where I read that, but I do remember reading something along those lines. And these lyrics, if you do buy the interpretation that we've just made, it kind of follows pretty logically with what that interview said. So musically, I think this is an interesting one, right? It is unlike Goodbye. It is, which I've said many times, I love and feels to me like a little bit of a throwback to much earlier songwriting on United Kingdom, or, you know, the Engine, or early AMC. This song just musically feels much more to me like a San Francisco era song or a 60 Watt era song.
Yeah, I could feel that. You know, this one is almost like dancey, especially compared to the rest of the songs on the album. You know, it's got kind of like a loungy but dancey sort of vibe to it. A little more, like adult contemporary-ish. I mean, it's still very much indie rock, you know, like just in the instrumentation. But it has this big sort of pop feeling chorus, this big uplift kind of thing. And, you know, I thought to myself that, you know, this I think was recorded before the Peter Buck West album. And, but this would have been, you know, probably just before. And it almost feels like this sort of like sets the stage for the Peter Buck style more. Like this feels more akin to that, like jangly REM upbeat kind of feel, you know, versus like slowcore. You know, this certainly is not slowcore. It feels a little incongruous with, you know, the rest of the album up to this point.
Yeah, I agree. It is a little bit of an oddball. It is evocative of like Southend on Sea or something from that 60 Watt era. It has that same kind of like relatively upbeat feel. But I will say that the execution, although again, it is not as kind of rehearsed and, you know, heavily arranged as some of the AMC stuff, where it really feels like they work through the arrangement pretty heavily. It feels a little bit, you know, more improvisational or something, just not as heavily studied. I like the sound. Again, I like the sound of this band behind a song like this much more than like Southend on Sea, right? It somehow feels a little less adult contemporary, I think, as a function primarily of who's backing him. Do you buy that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you know, these are indie rock guys. You know? And so this is like their version of like a pop kind of upbeat sound versus like a smoother jazz inflected, you know, kind of approach.
Yeah.
If you had had the 60-watt band record this song, it would have sounded more like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. They do a good job. I think it does stand out just as kind of like it has a very different vibe than anything else on the album.
Yeah, I think I would like this song substantially less if it were executed in the way that you just described. If it were executed more like the band executed South End on C on 60 watt, I would like the song less. I think I like it as well as I do. And it's not my favorite song on this album, at all. It's not probably in the top 3 or 4. But I think it works pretty well and sits pretty well with this album simply because of the way the band executed it. And again, I think that's one of the reasons that this album kind of grew on me so much over the course of the repeated listens. I really feel like there's something about how this selection of backing players just feels like a much better match, like a much more organic match with Eitzel and his, like the style of Eitzel that I tend to like. I just feel like it's a better fit.
I'm not going to argue with you.
Okay, don't. You better not, because we're going to move right on.
I just want us to get along. I just want us to get along.
Well, then why don't we continue the fun, continue the camaraderie by covering Cold Light of Day. This song is 3 minutes and 8 seconds. It is the one that we're going to play right now.
It's gonna discover me and say, hey, what are you doing here alone? In a cold light of day, in a cold light of day. What are you doing here alone? In a cold light of day.
All right, Jay William, I had a tough time with these lyrics, so why don't you take me on a lyrical journey and explain to me what it is that I couldn't get about this set?
So, yeah, I mean, it opens on this sort of like scene where it seems like the singer is, I don't know if he went on some kind of crazy bender and he wound up like sleeping on somebody's property.
Yeah.
And it's like the morning, or no, it's the afternoon. He says it's 2 PM. I've been here since 7 a.m. I've been hiding out on someone's private property.
Yeah.
So it sounds, I certainly remember the, shenanigans that, a younger J. William Hall may have gotten into, where I may have uttered words similar to this one. But I'm not sure beyond that, like what is going on here. Like, I'm not sure, who the protagonist is.
Yeah, it really is just this painting of a moment in time, right? It seems that way. It's like pretty clear, like, yeah, he's in the forest, like you don't know why, you know that he's not supposed to be there, and there's some, feeling that he's describing about that kind of hiding out or something. Very, interesting lyrics.
Part of me suspects that this was like born out of a jam, maybe. Like this wasn't a song that he brought to those guys and said, here's how it goes. It was more, he had maybe a basic idea, but it feels like it's a little more sketchy. Like it doesn't have like a cohesive, clear narrative or whatever.
This song reminds me most of the material on West. Of all of the songs on this record, this is the one that reminds me most of West.
Yeah. And I would say that, again, like not to harp on the drums and bass on this, but it feels like they kind of like learned the basics of the song and then just held it down. Like they didn't vary, a whole lot. And so it gets a little kind of monotonous, I think. And that would be a different, like AMC would have, taken it different places. And this one feels like it's just sort of like verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, and it's a little repetitive for me.
I think the core songwriting of this one is, I would agree, is probably not one of my favorites on the album. However, in terms of an Eitzel rocker, again, I'm going to disagree a little bit. I feel like this band does as competent a job executing an Eitzel rocker as anybody has, right? I think that there are some Eitzel rockers in the AMC catalog that they execute just perfectly, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. There's, more than there's a number. But there is an equal number, especially early in the career, where it's clear it's an Eitzel rocker, but they can't quite figure out a way to get into it, right? It just doesn't feel like they've ever really found it. In this, I actually feel like they kind of found it. Maybe it would benefit from a little bit more polish, but I feel like it feels pretty good. Like it, again, I guess I'm just saying, I kind of like this band for him. I don't know. I don't know how else to say it.
I like the band. I just wish they had more time to kind of like develop the songs further or play them live and kind of like, get the arrangement more locked down. This feels like it's a little shuffly and they kind of figured out the basic parts and then just like, wrote them through the whole song, with the exception of Kid Congo Powers, whose guitar work, I think, again, it evokes voodoo. It works in the same way. It's very inventive, and it's the most interesting thing musically for me about these like quote unquote band songs on this album. I think his guitar stuff is really cool. But the bass drums I feel like are more like basic, and just kind of doing their thing and not getting in the way. And that's fine. They didn't have a lot of time to do this. And so, but I, as players, like, yes, the basics are there. I think like these types of songs are indie songs, they're not polished, big label, whatever, I know like it's like Eitzel's been on this ride, for a few years where he's been dipping his toe, in that big label stuff and all of the pressures that come with that in terms of like what you have to sound like and what compromises you have to make in order to, get on a major. And, and I feel like this album is definitely a return to form in a way. This is a return to like an indie, production. Yeah. And it's refreshing, like I don't fault him for trying everything he could try, to get in more into the mainstream. But, I don't think they compromised that much on that. Like some of the sound and the production is slicker, but the songwriting is not, he's still, uniquely Eitzlerian.
Yes.
Even through the major label stuff, Yeah. So.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay, so should we move on then to Go Away?
Yes.
Okay, 3 minutes and 55 seconds. We are going to dive into yet another Ohio referencing tune in the Eitzel catalog. Go Away. Let's go.
A blank face on a child who can't reply to anything you say. Go away.
Okay, so J. William Hall, I'm going to dive into these lyrics because this is the song that I mentioned earlier. Actually, I think it was in the last episode that one source that I found claims is a Kathleen song. When I listened to it, thought it would have been Goodbye, but no. Go Away is the song that I believe it was a Magnet magazine review that claimed this was a Kathleen song.
Yes, I somehow stumbled across something that said the same because I have it in here. At first, I thought maybe it was about his mom, but then I read something said Kathleen, and then it was like, oh, she had been back in Columbus, and so those references, make sense.
And, it is, I do feel like, Kathleen increasingly, as we've kind of gone through this season of the podcast, becomes this like specter where you're thinking, God, is this a Kathleen song? Is that a Kathleen song? And you start to like impose her onto songs that even if it was inspired by her, maybe maybe it's not useful to think about that all of the time.
Right.
That said, I could not help but kind of like, once I read this, really impose that on top of the interpretation. Obviously, a lot of Ohio here, but I think the kind of main sentiments that really struck me is this simultaneous feeling of real resentment against the subject of the song, possibly Kathleen, but also this real sense of guilt, right? I just wanted to fill your soul with light. So it's a complicated relationship, which certainly seems to, kind of track with what we've read and heard about his relationship with Kathleen Burns.
Yes, I agree with all of the things that you say. I think that I like when this song kind of lifts off is second verse is when he again makes that jump where he goes to his higher register and the energy of the song just like surges at that point.
Yeah.
But I think it has some really nice, shoegaze is another term that, pops up here and again when we're talking about the AMC sound. And it's just kind of that like droney, washy feedback kind of thing that sometimes they get going, but they've got kind of like a nice sort of more mellow shoegazy kind of guitar going during this song. It definitely it sounds like indie rock, this is like Built to Spill, sort of vibe, indie vibe music.
Yeah, so to talk about that guitar, one of the things that I just commented in my notes that I love is this guitar, this mental guitar breakdown at the end of the song. But what was interesting to me is that Kid Congo Powers is not credited on this song. Right. Eitzel is the only guitarist credited here, so that must be Eitzel's mental guitar breakdown at the end of the song, which I don't know that I've heard anywhere else on the catalog, but I liked it.
Yeah, it sounds like, again, like they worked up a basic arrangement for this and then we're like, we'll just jam it out at the end. And they just went, and then it eventually just like craps out, kind of suddenly. But yeah, it doesn't, again, there's part of me that wishes like, I wish they had kind of, worked on it more and gotten a more dynamic arrangement, like throughout the song. But having said that, it sounds good.
Yeah, I will agree with you though that what really carries this song is Eitzel's performance. He is bringing his max performance to this song, high energy, high emotionality. It's just overall a great performance. I think one of the best performances on this album.
Yeah, I would agree. This is his showman, sort of side comes out, which has not been around for most of the album.
Yeah. All right, so shall we move on to the penultimate track on this album, Atico 18?
Indeed.
Okay, excellent. Let's dig in.
The only love you'll ever grow is to look beyond the things you know.
Jay William, 3 minutes and 52 seconds of pure loveliness. Can I just start with the lyrics here? I just love the chorus lyric. I just love it. I think it's so lovely. What I cannot do is tell you what this song is about. I have zero sense of that, but the chorus lyric I just think is impossibly lovely. And because it's not entirely clear that there's a kind of super traditional structure here. What I'm talking about there is the only love you'll ever grow is to look beyond the things you know. That section. Just a beautiful lyric, such an interesting, sweet sentiment. I just think this is like a lovely, lovely Eitzel composition. The one thing other than telling you what I think this is actually about, I tried to do some research to figure out what Atico 18 was. I found a whole bunch of like links to apartments in Europe. I can't remember which country it was, but it seems as though Atico means like floor or attic or something.
I think it means
language.
Attic in Spanish, because I went down that road as well. I Googled it. It was like, oh, it means attic in Spanish. So it's like Attic 18. I'm not sure what that means. Or
perhaps Atico 18, as we might say in Spanish. I know you're taking it back. You didn't know I was such a linguist.
I had no idea you were bilingual.
Well, I can do all of the numbers in Spanish, at least up to 100 or so.
That's impressive.
Well, listen, I'm a man of many gifts, many talents, including a reasonable bit of Spanish. Okay.
An international man of mystery.
That's right. So what do you kind of, do you get anything out of this snake metaphor in these lyrics? I really try to, there are these people, Craig and was it Juan?
Craig and Jose.
Craig and Jose, yeah. So, there are specific people referenced multiple times. There's this snake that makes, an appearance in multiple verses. But I will be damned if I can figure out what exactly he's kind of talking about.
I'm not sure either. They're pretty opaque. I definitely am getting like, and this is terrible because I'm sure this is so off base, but like I'm getting like Jeffrey Epstein sort of vibes from the lyrics in this one. Like I'm not sure why, but there's something that feels like sexual and like skeezy in some kind of way, except for the chorus. It is this lovely chorus, and of course it's presented in this soft, delicate kind of finger picked. They have nice harmony on the chorus that, that's the vibe I'm getting, but like, I don't know,
Yeah. I don't know at all. I kind of, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can go with you on this Jeffrey Epstein journey, although I do like the vaguely conspiratorial direction of the conversation that we could have. But I have to just be honest.
Is this song on the flight logs? Can we
Yeah, is Eitzel? That would be maybe the biggest surprise of the Epstein flight logs if Eitzel was on them. Can you even imagine? I'm certain that's not the case. Everyone,
was like, who's this under Eitzel? One word.
Oh my God.
Voody. What does that mean?
No, but I would say that the lyrics are a bit inscrutable, but I just think the music in this one is just lovely. It's just completely fucking lovely. It is a damn near perfect Mark Eitzel song, I think. And I have to call out here, again, back to the kind of like him and a guitar vibe here for the rest of the album, but this is where it switches back to it. I have to take a moment again to appreciate just how lovely and clean his guitar playing is.
Yeah, beautiful guitar playing. He, and he does these sort of droney alternative tunings, and he gets kind of like a little looped finger picky thing going. And it's recorded clean, like close. Yeah. Same with the vocal. The whole effect is really good. I mean, there's been a through line, of course, through AMC of him doing these occasional, like really soft, delicate solo things like Nevermind or, Pillar of Salt on Everclear, like, and so I feel like this sort of like is pulling on that thread of his songwriting where there are these really like meditative, but this one almost has like the guitar almost feels like flamenco ish, like this like soft kind of Brazilian sort of playing.
Yeah, it's just, what's so interesting about this is I feel like, and again, we're going to get into this EP, is it 2 EPs or is it an album thing? But it does feel like you reach this pinnacle of intensity with Go Away. And then you transitioned into this, and it's the beginning of the end of the album. It just lightens everything up. It's just like a sweetness. There is not really a darkness in this song, although the snake in the lyrics certainly represents some kind of darkness. But I don't. But maybe the snake in the lyrics. And again, I'm just kind of riffing here a little bit. Mm-hmm. It is that notion. It's a metaphor that kind of represents all of the darkness that threatens the simple peace and happiness of Craig and Jose here. And maybe Craig and Jose just represent a much more simple love or relationship that he kind of articulates in the chorus. I don't know that, but it kind of like emotionally in the flow of the album, it feels like that would be an interesting and nice resolution. And I kind of like that. I like that this impossibly dark, when I do think it's like difficult to argue that this isn't an extraordinarily dark record, even for Mark Eitzel. I like that it somehow concludes with this song and then the next song that I think are really just like not that dark. They lift you back up a little bit. I really kind of came to love that about this sequencing.
Yeah, that is a good point because, even though this one clearly sounds like the acoustic songs on the first side, the tone is not at all as grim as some of those. And so like I do think that this was sort of like a gentle transition from the rock band stuff to close the album out on more of a meditative kind of like gentle note, as opposed to dark, bleak,
Yeah.
That is this the first instance where I know we have one song left, but well, maybe we should talk about that song.
Okay. All right. So why don't we talk about that song? Final track, Sun, Smog, Seahorse, which I'm just going to make a very strange side comment. The phrase Sun, Smog, Seahorse reminds me very much of a Joanna Newsom lyric.
Oh.
I'm just going to kind of throw that out there. But Sun, Smog, Seahorse, 3 minutes and 13 seconds. Last track on the album. Let's listen.
Hands in pockets, eyes screwed shut. Let it all go. Hands in pockets, eyes screwed shut. Let it all go. No address book. You're lost in the sky.
All right, Jay William, what about these lyrics? Give it to me.
Well, first thing I want to say is that this is the only song that appears on both the Lover's Leap USA disc of demos and outtakes, and also on the album proper. And it's a different recording, but the arrangement is basically the same. It's another, solo acoustic, more or less kind of thing. This song is like it's like this minimalist nursery rhyme almost. Like it feels like a almost like a haiku, compared to, so many of Eitzel's lyrics are very elaborate and the verses get into very, complicated imagery and all of this kind of stuff. And this one almost feels like a lullaby, just this gentle, like smaller sort of thought.
And totally agree.
Joanna Newsom is an apt reference. It has a tweeness to it, because of the, Sun, Smog, Seahorse. Like, I don't know, there's just something sort of twee about it, which isn't, I mean, I don't even mean that in like in a derogatory way or whatever, but
I
think you're right.
He
doesn't dabble in that a lot, like this sort of like more fanciful, wordplay or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the hallmarks of her lyrics is she uses a lot of unusual words and kind of like will choose words and lyrics as much for the meaning of the individual words as for the actual kind of poetic sound of the words in sequence, right? There's a probably the most obvious one that made me think of this comparison is clam, crab, cockle, cowrie. Right. Off of her first record, but it is that kind of like alliteration, and you know what I mean. There's just this like very playfulness in the words themselves.
Did Joanna Newsom rip off Mark Eitzel's "Sun Smog Seahorse"?
It's, you know what, we should probably ask. We should probably ask Newsom if you're brave enough to come on the pod to defend yourself here. We'll have you on, but you better be ready.
Guilty until proven innocent.
So, but I do think that this is, to your point, it is a beautiful small image, I think, that he's capturing in these lyrics. It is not some big emotion, big relationship, big feeling that he's having. It's I just had this kind of much more poetic sense of a picture of balloons being released into the sky, right? Somehow. And it was like a very lovely sense of like watching that and kind of like letting go both of emotional stuff and just kind of floating away yourself. Now, I think you could probably make the argument maybe it's a giving up song, but I didn't really get that sense as strongly. I feel like it's a really lovely resolution to, as we already said, this sequence of songs that are at times really impossibly dark. And it almost, for me as the listener, says to me like, yeah, you can have all of those incredibly dark feelings. You can do, that's all stuff that you can feel, but that can go away. You know what I mean? And you can get to this other smaller place that's really just kind of lovely in the moment. Yeah, I just think it's a fucking great closer for this album. I love the smallness of it.
Yeah, it's definitely, I don't know if it's unique, but it's unusual in the Eitzel canon, I think, as, it's just this very gentle, like...
Yeah. Lullaby was a great way to put it.
And it feels crafted, like it feels like intentional, like all of the lyrics in it and stuff, as opposed to some of the more free-formy feeling things that he goes on. So, I'm into it. And it's also the closing track on Lover's Leap, so I do wonder why he decided to include it on both, because they're pretty similar recordings. But yeah, good album closer.
Good album closer. So now we are completed. We are finished with the album, Jay William.
Whoa.
Before we get to the part that I know that you're thinking about already, the best and the worst, I do want to have a quick discussion about the 2 EPs. So why don't you tell us what the 2 EPs are and whether you think that form of release would be better than the single album?
So, okay, basically my thought is you split the album by the solo acoustic feeling stuff is one EP. The band recorded stuff is the other EP. So for the solo acoustic, you got Are You the Trash, Xmas Lights Spin, Auctioneer Song, White Rosary. Then Atico 18, Sun Smog Seahorse. 6 songs. So then the 5 are, with the full band, would be If I Had a Gun, Goodbye, Queen of No One, Cold Light of Day, and Go Away.
Yeah.
I guess the answer is no. Like, I don't think it was better that they did it as 2 EPs, because I think EPs get ignored, versus albums. Especially in terms of, not that this sold huge numbers. The sound is very different between the 2 setups, but I don't think it's like so jarring that, you can't listen to it as a single album experience.
Yeah. 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 I mean, listen, I think that it does make sense. That argument makes sense. But I think I feel pretty strongly that despite that there are dissimilarities between the instrumentation, the recording of those two different kind of recording sessions, I feel like he's created in this track listing a really interesting emotional journey for the listener that I totally appreciate. I that became almost to me my favorite part of the album. I love how it just steadily builds in intensity, emotionally and kind of musically, up into the kind of the height of the band stuff, and then kind of like ends with this really interesting little coda of Atico 18 and Smog Seahorse that kind of like releases the pressure, which clearly builds over the course of this in many ways pretty dark record. I think in terms of track listing, I said it up at the beginning. My only quibble, I think, with this entire album is I would have excluded Are You the Trash from the album completely.
Yeah, that's a tough call because I think Xmas Late Spin somehow as the first track would have been too
dark.
No, just like too epic for like the first track. Like it's like, I think he almost wanted it to be like, okay, here's an appetizer and then we're going to get to like a big one. But the thing that we must consider.
Yes.
So Lovers Leap USA, it's the tour only demos and odds and sods kind of thing that he was selling at shows as he was touring during this time. And I've seen it described as outtakes from Caught in a Trap or things that were in the consideration for Caught in a Trap. So, and I haven't dove deep yet into it. I've listened through it a couple times and I already am like, there are some great songs on this. And so like, I guess if I have to do Jay Williams, button it up, version of this album, it's going to be a double album that includes Lovers Leap material. You've been warned.
Interesting.
You've been warned.
All right, well, why don't you prep that for when we cover Lovers Leap? We'll have to make some decision. We haven't made decisions yet on what we're going to be covering next, but we're going to have to make a decision. We are definitely moving into this area of, especially the Eitzel catalog, where it seems, at least for me, someone who isn't super familiar with these later solo albums, like the differentiation between kind of like the quote unquote official full length releases and these more experimental EPs or whatever else, it kind of becomes like unclear what's what. So we'll have to make some decisions about what we're going to cover. We're certainly not going to be able to cover everything, but we will cover whatever we think makes logical sense.
That sounds like a challenge.
It is a challenge, but we're up for the challenge. So, Jay Williams, speaking of challenges, this is the challenge that I think you need to be prepared for. I need for you to decide what the worst song on this album is. What is the worst song?
In my opinion, the worst song on this album falls early on the second side.
Yeah.
Third track of the second side, Cold Light of Day, was my least favorite song. Yeah.
Interesting. I can understand that. You kind of highlighted that in your rundown of the song when we were covering that track specifically, but I am unfortunately going to have to let you know that it is incorrect. The worst song on the album, of course, is Are You the Trash? I have been hinting at this throughout our conversations in both episodes. It is without a doubt the worst song on the album. It's a short song, but its brevity is not enough to raise it above any of the other songs on this album. But Jay William, you have an opportunity to redeem yourself by selecting the best song correctly on this album. Please tell us, Jay William, what is your best song?
So there are a handful of songs that are in the running for my pick as best song on the album. Several of them are of the acoustic solo variety, and several of them are of the full band variety. I have decided that the song that I'm going to go with the song that sort of like pulled me into the world of this album and was the first thing that like made me you know, really notice. Xmas Lights Spin. I think it's an epic. It's quiet, but it's got a lot of sections and parts and interesting lyrics, and you feel like you've gone on a journey after listening to it. Xmas Lights Spin. Track 2 is the best song.
All right. Well, that song does take you on a journey, J. William Hall. Unfortunately, in your case, it takes you on a journey to Wrongsville.
Ooh.
Okay? Yeah, that's right. The best song on this album is, there are a few options here, but I'm going to tell you what the best song is. It is Goodbye. It is Goodbye because it is just such a powerful return to just the slow core roots of American Music Club in some ways. It is a genre that I love generally. It is a mode of American Music Club that I love pretty intensely, and I think it's executed extremely well here by Eitzel and this band, frankly. I love that song. I think it's a great side B opener. It's the best song.
I have it as my second favorite song. So
yeah. All right. Well, you're close.
We can quibble.
No. All right. We can quibble. But why don't we quibble next week when we come back and we cover some Mark Eitzel album that we haven't figured out yet. But we will definitely figure it out, and then we'll post it on the internet, and we'll do it.
Dear listener, you already know which one I'm going to advocate for.
Which one is? It's going to be Lovers Leap USA.
That's right.
Oddities. Well, we will see. We're just going to have to take a quick look. But listen, thank you all for listening once again. We appreciate it. Why don't you just go ahead and send us an email, backtrackingrocks at gmail.com, or follow us on the Twitter, BacktrackingRocksROX, or the Instagram, BacktrackingRocksROX, or the Reddit on the American Music Club subreddit, or at username BacktrackingRocksROX. Those are all of the ways you can get in touch with us. Write a review. Share it with your friends. Send it around to different, tastemakers who make the taste of the world of podcasting.
What I would love to see is if you, listener, got some bumper stickers or some other kinds of stickers printed up that said Backtracking Rocks, ROX, and then you put them up on like poles and, mailboxes and just sides of buildings and that kind of thing. I think that is not asking too much.
Yeah, or you could make a bumper sticker that says, I break for podcasts about American Music Club.
That's a good idea as well. That is a good idea.
Yeah. Okay, well, why don't you guys go figure out what your spin on that is and get it done.
What do you think about a honk if you love American Music Club?
Honk if you love American Music Club, I think, is also great. It's a classic, right? That kind of contextualization for a bumper sticker, it's a classic. Or you could even do one of those like a baby on board, except it would be, listener of podcast about American Music Club on board, right?
Do you think that people will try to smash into cars that have that hanging in the window?
No, in fact, I think that EMS workers, in the unfortunate circumstance where, you've had an accident and they need to get the jaws of life to remove you from your car, they'll see that sticker and they'll be like, okay, guys, there is an American Music Club podcast listener in this wreck of a vehicle. We got to put on our game face and we got to get this person out so they can continue to listen to Backtracking.
They'll say, secure this person's heart first and foremost.
That's
because
right.
if they're a true fan of American Music Club, then they got to have heart, right?
That's right. So listen, we will deal with all of that next week. But Jay William, thank you as always for joining me for a little conversation on American Music Club.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Listeners,
Mahalo.
you're also welcome. We will see you all again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.